Okay, so we're almost finished. Just a few more things to know about our Puritan pals. Again, they were an intensely patriarchal society. Because it's a patriarchal religion, they're trying to reinstate the values and the traditions and the social structure of the Old Testament. That is an intensely patriarchal system, so they also were an intensely patriarchal system. They believe that God the Father directs the endeavors of the elect church, and that in that same kind of model, the husband, father, directs his family, not just his wife and children, but any servants or slaves they would have. So the hierarchy basically went husband on top, wife underneath, children, servants, slaves kind of on the third tier at the bottom. Yeah. And they believe that women are inherently inferior to men because of the guilt brought about by Eve's actions in the book of Genesis. And this is going to be important to keep in mind when reading Anne Bradstreet's poetry. She's really, really self-deprecating throughout her writings, and there's a reason for that. If she hadn't been, if she seemed like she was a little too proud of her work, then that would have been very negatively received. In fact, pay attention to that preface before her poetry, written by her brother-in-law, basically saying, don't worry, she doesn't have a big head about it. She didn't even want to publish this poetry. Like, it's just so good that the men in her life felt that she really needed to. So, same with Mary Rowlands's captivity narrative. Very similar kind of preface at the beginning from one of the men in her family. I believe, I want to say her brother. Sorry, I'm blanking on that. Same kind of thing, saying, you know, she didn't want to publish this. She's just far too modest. She didn't think her writing was worth, or her life experience is worth anyone's time because she's just a woman. But there's just so much valuable religious instruction to be had from her experience and from this text that we basically forced her, we twisted her arm to put it out, because otherwise she'd seem immodest. So, yep. So this would be, again, in class where I would have y'all look for an example of this patriarchal social order being enforced in our readings. I just gave you a couple of really good ones, but there's plenty more to go around. So some problems that they ran into. Of course, there are going to be problems along the way. The war with the Pequots in 1637. So this is there's a whole separate lecture for this material that I have for y'all called Mary Rowlandson and King Philip's War. Really important that you understand that before reading her captivity narrative. So please take a look at that lecture video after this one. And that was really key. Also, dissenters. So within the group, again, it's all about social conformity and uniformity, and so it was this constant kind of sniffing out of and dealing with dissent among community members. The two biggest, and both are mentioned in your readings, Roger Williams, he was booted out basically because he advocated for greater tolerance toward the natives. And yeah, they didn't like that. He was like, well, he said some what they consider pretty heretical things about the natives being, people too. And as we know, the Puritans believed themselves to be God's chosen, and so they did not like that. He was banished from their community. Anne Hutchinson. So there's quite a bit about her in your readings as well, and she was a really rebellious figure. She had some pretty highfalutin ideas called antinomian ideas, and that led to a really high-profile trial by the community elders, which that's kind of a breakdown of that is included in the journals that you're going to read, and she was subsequently banished as well. And both of these figures ended up going on to form their own communities. Roger Williams, I want to say Rhode Island. Yeah, he went on to help found Providence, Rhode Island. And so he's still actually a really popular figure there. So there's more about these folks in the lecture about the 18th century and kind of the fall of the Puritans. So Anne Hutchinson's antinomian beliefs, just so you have a sense of what she's being put on trial for when you read about her. basically, an antinomian is a Christian who believes that faith and divine grace bring about salvation. So that really flies in the face of that whole double predestination thing. She did not believe that her fate had already been decided, and that is both her faith and the grace of God that would bring about salvation. For that reason, she said it was not necessary to accept these very strictly established moral laws that the Puritans were laying down, including ones that say that she as a woman can't hold meetings in her home to preach these antinomian beliefs. She did, and they were very popular, and so of course the elders got caught wind of that and had to put a stop to it because it's pretty anti-Puritan in a lot of ways. She ended up okay in the long run, but notice the way they talk about her in your readings, and especially when they talk about when she has a child, and they say that it was like this monstrous child that's basically, haha, see, we all told you she was evil, and that's God's way of showing that she was corrupt and everything. So just, it's pretty harsh, but it just shows what it was like to be a woman with opinions during the time of the Puritans. So where have all the Puritans gone? Why do we have Puritans anymore? Where do they go? Why are there no more Puritan churches? Well, there's a lot to this, and I'm just going to touch on it very briefly because there's more about it in your 18th century lecture videos. But just briefly, there was, new generations almost always want to make changes from the previous generation. That's inevitable. And the Puritans really just didn't allow for that ever being a possibility. It just never occurred to them that maybe people might want some change down the line. So there wasn't a really good, I guess, business model that they were working with, like kind of plan for future growth built into the Puritan church philosophy. It's a real decline in the whole rigor of the church, especially because of this whole idea that, there's really nothing you can do to be in or out. And one of the compromises that was made to try to get more people to be part of the church, because it was kind of dropping off, is this idea of okay, well, we can't be church members unless you say we can. It's just, it was a little too exclusionary. So they kind of came up with this compromise called the halfway covenant, which said that children of people who were already full church members could be partial members, which meant they could get baptized in the church, but they couldn't vote on any church business or receive communion. So it was a very consolation prize kind of thing. And it just it wasn't enough to justify how much control the church would have over their life for that little return, I guess you could say. And then there's a lot of other things too. Again, I'll talk about that in the other lecture video. But of course, the Salem witch trials at the 1690s really marked the end of the Puritan reign. And I've got a corresponding video about the potential causes of the Salem witch trials in the corresponding videos folder. It's a pretty helpful video, especially watching it before you read Cotton Mather's Wonders of the Invisible World, which is basically like him justifying the actions of the judges during the witch trials and defending what happened, basically arguing that yes, every accusation was true, and it's basically just here's what these people were accused of doing, and it's pretty crazy. So it's not a terribly long read, but it's a really important one if you want to or need to understand what happened during the trials and what people believed was happening. So please watch that video and read Cotton Mather. Okay, and I will see you in the next series of videos. Take care.